The Miracle Apple by Planet Money. Prologue, The Tyrant. Once upon a time, the apple section in grocery stores was ruled by a tyrant. Tough-skinned, mealy in character building, it was the Red Delicious. And it was red, but really not so delicious. This is the story of how one man and his miracle apple changed the world of fruit forever. In the old days, like the 1960s, apples were a commodity, like screws or cheap socks. Most big stores just wanted a couple of apples, and especially the Red Delicious, because it was big, it was red, and it had a tough skin that made it easy to transport. People figured an apple's an apple. There was no reason to pay more for one than another. As a result, there was no way for apple growers to make a better apple and charge more for it. It was a bad business to be in. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Hated Apples. In those days, there was a young boy in North Carolina named David Bedford. He didn't know it at the time, but he was destined to change the world of apples forever. Young Bedford loved fruit, but he hated apples, because remember, the tyranny of the Red Delicious. But when he grew up and went off to college, he met this person who was carrying around a bushel of yellow apples from an exotic and mysterious land called Michigan. And this person said, "Try these, man, they'll change your whole world." Bedford took a bite and he saw the truth. He knew the world of apples had to change, and he would be the one to change it. Chapter 2. The Man and the Miracle Apple. It's the 1980s, and Bedford's quest to topple the Red Delicious has led him to become an apple breeder at the University of Minnesota. His is a hard, solitary toil. In the peak of the season, he's taking bites from 500 or 600 apples a day, looking for that one perfect apple. Finally, one day in the early 1980s, he comes across this tree number 1711. He picks an apple from it, takes a bite, and it tasted crisp and honeyed. So he called it
Honeycrisp.
But it didn't catch on at first, because it was harder to grow and because grocery stores were still pretty unimaginative places. They looked at Bedford's apple and said, no thanks, the produce aisle's fine. And so the apple growers said, yeah, we're fine too. Chapter 3. An Unlikely Alliance. There was one apple grower named Dennis Courtier, though. Around this time, he visits Bedford and says, "I'm not getting anywhere growing the same apples as everybody else. Got anything different?" Bedford does. Courtier tries an apple from tree 1711 and says, "Sweet Iden, this is the apple I've been waiting for." He goes all in, planting Honeycrisp. When these apples finally get to the big supermarkets, they do great. The Honeycrisp proves consumers are willing to pay more for a better apple. It finally breaks the apple free from the commodity world. At long last, Courtier's making good money. But now everyone wants to grow Honeycrisp, and Courtier knows soon it'll just be another one of those cheap generic apples. Meanwhile, Bedford's worried that low-quality Honeycrisps will start to flood the market and make the apple's good name worthless. Chapter 4. Trademarks, or The Fall of Red the Tyrant. Bedford had patented the Honeycrisp, but the thing with patents is they expire after 20 years, and in a business where trees take 5 years to grow, that's not going to cut it. But he knew of an Australian apple company that was doing something radical.
G'day, mate.
Morning, Isaac. What's on the docket today?
Well, let's have a look.
They had actually trademarked an apple name, and trademarks last forever.
Just trademarking this apple, mate.
Beauty, mate. Beauty.
A few of these trademarked foreign apples had actually started showing up in the U.S. So he decided to see if he could make that work with a U.S.-grown apple. He could. He hadn't quite gotten it right for Honeycrisp, but he did with the next apple, Sweet Tango. He licensed it to Courtier. Now, even if someone else grew the same apple, they couldn't use the same name. If you own the trademark, you decide who can grow or sell your apple. You manage the market. The world of different Apple brands exploded around the Red Delicious. Envy, Cosmic Crisp, Jazz, Kanzi, Lady Alice, Ruby Frost, Snapdragon, Pink Lady. So when you're in a store today, you're not just looking at a bunch of apples. You are looking at the legacy of the miracle apple, the freedom from the commodity world, and the big business of a small fruit, grown in part from that moment Bedford tasted that sweet, crisp apple on tree 1711 in 1983. The end.